Hello everyone and welcome to this fifth video on a series of video on getting started with Angular. In this part of the video, I will be going over components in detail. What are components? What is their significance? How components are reusable? How components, if bundle up, make up an entire Angular application? What is the concept of nested components? And how do we go about creating them manually? And in the next video, I will show you guys how you can create components using Angular CLI. So in the previous video, I went over in detail that we have this index.html file, which is a single HTML file, and that is where Angular gets that single page application term from. And I have this app-root selector. This app-root selector, obviously from the main.ts, it comes from the main.ts file. So main.ts file translates the app module and tells Angular that this particular app-root, this custom selector, refers to this app component. Now, this is just one component. What if we have multiple components or more components in the app component? Do we always have to import it inside of the main.ts and add the selector inside of index.html? No, we don't do that. Inside of index.html and main.ts, we will not be doing any sort of changes whatsoever as far as adding component goes. Any other component that gets created will always be added inside of its parent component. In our case, in this particular project, and in most of Angular projects, the app component is always the parent or the root component. Any other component will always go inside of it. That always happens. So we already have our Angular project running. I did ngserve, it's running. But before we create components, I would like to go over in very brief detail as to what components play as far as the HTML side or the front end side goes. I have this website open by the name of seek.com. It's a very well known website for searching job applications in Australia. I can see a header. I can see the sign in button. If I click on it, it redirects me to a sign in page. I can obviously see the search bars. I see all of these different elements which make up this entire web page. Each and every element that you see, this header over here, or this bar over here, or the search bar, if I click on profile, the profile page comes up. All of these are more or less components in the Angular world. This header can be a component. This profile page, when it shows up, it can be a component. This particular sign in, if I click on sign in and the sign in page comes up, the sign in page can be a component in itself. So to simplify it without getting too technical, a component is nothing less than an element that makes up a web application, a web page. It can be a header, a navbar, a footer, the main content of the page. But yeah, that is what components are. And obviously, when I explain all of this practically through examples, you guys will get an even better understanding. So I have said that a component, this app component is the parent component, the root component in which all other components will go. I would like to create a component, and how I go about doing this is that, let me first delete this folder over here. I would like to go from start. So inside of my app component, which is my parent component, I create a folder and I call it customers. So basically I'm going to list the number of customers in my application, something. I'm not going to the business logic right now, but I create this customers folder. Now inside of the customers folder, I will have to create multiple files. More or less, there will be three. There can be more, but to make up that component, the very basic files which are needed are three, which is the HTML file, the SCSS or CSS file, and the TS file. There can be more, but for the sake of this video, we're only going to be creating three. So what I do is I create this file customers.component.html. I create another file which is customers.component.scss, and one more which will be customers.component.ts. I have created these three files, right? I have created this customers component. Now, how do I let's add a random HTML tag inside of it, inside of the HTML file customers component.html. I say welcome to the customers page. I have created the HTML file, but there's no way for me to render it inside the browser. Now, if I were to open the browser up, And remember, when you do control as an Angular project, the Angular project gets recompiled again. I don't see this welcome to the customers page HTML anywhere, and rightfully so, because I have not loaded this component yet. I have not used it anywhere. Now, this customers component is inside of the app folder, or you can say the app component. So the app component is the parent over here, and the customers component is the child. Now, if I want to use the child component inside of my inside of the parent, I have to provide a little bit of more details. And how do I go about doing that is I go inside of the TS file for that component, and I have to give this customer component some identity. Right now it's just HTML and an empty TS file and an empty SCSS file. There's no way for Angular to automatically scan my application and think that this customer's component actually exists. It has no identity. I have to do it myself for this particular part. But obviously, when you create components through the Angular CLI, automatically all of this will be done for us. So what I do is, and because this customer component of TS is nothing more than it's just a class. So what I do is I do export class, and I will say export class customers component, and I put these two parentheses. Still, we have a lot of work to do. I have to provide a decorator, which will tell Angular that this is a component, round brackets, curly brackets, and I have to provide three other things. The first is a selector. Now, what is a selector? A selector is the name for this component, which will be used to refer this component anywhere inside of the application. So what I do is app-customers. I also need to provide where does the HTML file for this component lies. So that will be template URL, and VS Code is helping me auto complete all of this. And I have to provide the relative path for this customers.component.html file. I do that like this. So I do customers.component.html, and I also need to provide the styles. Where do the styles file lie? And this will be not an address, but it will be an array. So what I do is relative path to the customers.component.scss. Now we have created this basic skeleton. If I were to now, because I have this selector, just like the app-root inside of index.html, if I take the selector of this child customer component and go inside its parent, which is the app component, and I declare it like this as app-customers, I would expect this to work. Let's see. It should not. It will fail. The reason is that whenever we create a component, and I went over briefly in the previous videos, we need to let the parent component know that this component exists. We have given this component an identity, but we have nowhere told Angular that this component exists, and you have to load it in. And where does the loading part take place? Inside of the parent components app.module.ts, which I went over briefly. We have these four terms over here: declarations, imports, providers, bootstrap. I did mention in the previous videos that declarations are used to declare all child components inside of that parent component. So if I were to do customer component, and I can see this thanks to VS Code autocomplete, the file is loaded in. And where is it loaded in from? Customers.component. So basically this customer component file has been loaded in. This file has been loaded in. Customer.component.ts has been loaded in. If I save this, it runs because I obviously loaded it in. Now, one question may arise is that if app.module.ts is inside of the app component, can I have a customers.module.ts file as well? Yes, we can. But for the sake of this video and for the sake of simplicity, we will be sticking with only one component just to simplify things. So we created this component manually, right? And we loaded it inside the app.module.ts. I saved the project, and if I go inside of my project which is running, I can see welcome to the customers page. Now, if I were to inspect this, what do I see? I see this h1 tag, but this h1 tag is inside of app-customers, this selector, which is inside of app-root. So we have successfully created a component manually. We loaded it in the app.module.ts and we managed to render it inside of the browser. In the next video, I will be going over how we create nested components using the Angular CLI and also going over the role that this customer.component.scss file plays, which is not big. It just goes about and adds style to our project. Till we meet again in the next video, this is Mohit Lodhi signing off. Thank you.